Welcome. A very warm greetings to you all. Thank you for joining us again for another Pariyatti Presents event. My name is Briha Sarathi, and I'm here on behalf of Pariyatti as its Executive Director. We're grateful that you've all joined us today. For those of you who are not already familiar with Pariyatti, we're a non-profit charitable organization based in the USA. Our mission is to enrich the world by disseminating the words of the Buddha, providing sustenance for the seeker's journey, and illuminating the meditator's path. Pariyatti imports books from around the world, reprints books, publishes new titles, and converts existing material into digital formats. We protect and provide an enormous catalog of Dhamma resources in many languages and formats that otherwise would not be as easily available. We offer many free services, such as the Pariyatti Learning Center, Treasures of Pariyatti, and Daily Words for Inspiration via email, RSS feeds, and our mobile app. We offer most audio and video material, as well as many ebooks and audiobooks free of charge, including a large number of resources for students of SN Goenka. We also organize donation-based residential Pali workshops and facilitate pilgrimages for Vipassana meditators. For more information about Pariyatti, please do visit our website at pariyatti.org. That's PARIYATTI.org. Please note that in order to ensure a seamless experience for our audience, we've chosen to pre-record this interview with Dr. Paul Fleischman. The question and answer portion will be live, and Dr. Fleischman will be responding to questions we received during this event. So, please feel free to send your questions via the chat feature in Zoom, and send them to the user named Send Questions Here. So for those of you who are not already familiar with Dr. Fleischman, he's a retired psychiatrist, an author, and a Vipassana teacher appointed by SN Goenka, specifically for presenting Vipassana to Western audiences using scientific concepts. Dr. Fleischman obtained his MD in 1971 and trained in psychiatry at the Yale University School of Medicine, where he also served as a chief resident in psychiatry. He was a psychiatric consultant to numerous hospitals and clinics, and lectured at conferences, universities, and institutions throughout the Americas, Europe, and Asia. His many Pariyatti publications include Cultivating Inner Peace, Karma and Chaos, Vipassana Meditation, the Scientific Worldview, etc. Now, retired from a more than 30-year private psychiatry practice, he lives in rural New England with his wife Susan, who is also a Vipassana teacher in the tradition of SN Goenka. Dr. Fleischman's talks and articles are addressed to students looking for clarification about Vipassana's logic, utility, and psychological, biological, and spiritual effects. So today, Dr. Fleischman is interviewed by Kory Goldberg. Kory has a PhD in religious studies from the University of Quebec in Montreal, Canada, and he teaches ethics, critical thinking, religion, and sustainability at Champlain College in Saint-Lambert, Quebec. He co-authored Along the Path, The Meditator's Guide to the Pilgrimage in the Buddha's Land, and is a general editor of the Pariyatti Journal, as well as a Vipassana teacher in the tradition of SN Goenka. So without further ado, I give you Paul and Kory.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the third session exploring Paul's latest book, Power of Small Changes, Vipassana Meditation through the Lens of Biology, Psychology, and Culture. So Goenkaji had asked Paul to speak and write about Vipassana meditation to academics and professionals in a manner that gives the practice credibility in the modern age. This book, The Power of Small Changes, reflects many years of Paul's lectures and talks at universities and conferences and meditation centers. So in the first two episodes, we discussed the psychosocial and neurobiological dimensions of Vipassana meditation, as presented in the university talks and lectures section of the book. Today, and in the following conversation, we'll be discussing the main themes that are outlined in the old student section of the book. More specifically, today we'll be discussing building a sustainable daily practice. So I'd like to just remind you, if you have questions for Paul, please type them into the chat and try to keep the questions as focused as possible, connected to what we're discussing today. So, Paul, students who often fall away from a home practice of 2 one-hour sessions per day, even though they have the intention to maintain the practice, often fall into self-criticism, and even feelings of inferiority. I remember shortly after my wife Michelle gave birth to our son, Jai, 19 years ago, one of the first things you shared with us was the advice that Goenkaji gave to you and Susan when Forrest was born. And this was when the child was nursing or sleeping in our arms, that we should practice anapana, feeling sensations, and sending metta to our child. This, along with your advice or even blessing to say, to situationally modify the daily meditation standard and to stop yearning to sit long courses right after the birth of a new infant was a relief. And it was actually a boon that saved our family, if I'm perfectly honest. Is there anything else that you might share with new parents who are struggling with keeping their practice at home?
Sure. So we are both lucky and burdened with being the early generations in the dispersion of actual Vipassana practice around the world. If we go back thousands of years, we don't have any record in recent thousands of years of lay people widely practicing Vipassana. So there's no way to ask the question, what did mothers of the past do? What did new fathers of the past do while they were trying to maintain a daily Vipassana practice? There's no answer to that in our traditions. There's no answer to that in the Pali Canon. And of course, the Pali Canon is more than 2,000 years old. And so we're pioneers. We're off on a new adventure for which the rules or the guidance or the best methods have not yet been established. So the good news is we have the fun, the adventure, the newness of creating our meditation practice under conditions that are fairly recent. And the trouble is we have no guidance, or we don't have very good guidance. Goenkaji's guidance was simple and clear. When you become a parent, the care of the child is the number one issue in your life. Nothing should stand between you and that sense of care. Nothing should reduce it or diminish it. And that was the advice he gave us. But it's also a little abstract. Does that mean the mother shouldn't sit at all? Should just hold the baby and send metta? Does that mean the mother should sit if the baby's asleep, but not if the baby's awake? Does that mean the mother should sit half an hour? Is the father the same as the mother? Are there gender differences in roles? Is the mother nursing and the father can't be in the same role? So many questions are unanswered. So I would say this question comes up quite a bit. We certainly have many people who have children and who are meditators. And the first principle has to be to follow Goenkaji's advice. Care of the child comes first. And the second principle is the heart and core of our Dhamma practice, which is this is going to change. One of the things that happens to a new parent feels like, I'm in this condition and it's never going to end. I haven't slept in 4 weeks. I'm exhausted. The baby's only 1 month old at this point. It'll take forever to get to year 1, not to mention year 18. I'm stuck. And that's, of course, not true. And everything changes. And pretty soon you look around over your shoulder and your child's in college. So first, baby comes first. Second, everything changes. And your practice has to be fluid, guided by Dhamma volition and intelligent discernment, and not by rigid rules.
Great, thank you. That's really helpful, especially considering that we are a modern tradition in modern times. And so, a question that ATs are repeatedly asked, and which you mentioned throughout your all student talks, concerns the 1 hour meditation session. Can you please review the purpose of meditating twice a day for an hour? Because there's no record of the Buddha suggesting that we meditate for 1 hour twice a day. In fact, he never gave any advice or prescription regarding the length of time for meditation. I'm also guessing that he didn't foresee the 17th century invention of the 60-minute hour. Therefore, isn't this 1 hour prescription merely an arbitrary, invented concept?
It is an invented concept, but I wouldn't call it arbitrary. So let's divide this answer into two parts. First, why twice a day? There is a pretty clear answer to that, although it still is not contained in the Buddha's teaching. But today we know the human endocrine cycle is a 24-hour cycle with different activity in the morning and in the evening. When you wake up in the morning, your steroid hormones are rising from a sleeping level to a waking level. And that arousal or rising of steroids in your body gives you a set on the day. You have a biological preparedness to get up and go out and live actively. By the time the evening has come, the opposite is occurring. Your steroid hormones, these are the endogenous steroids. I'm not talking about any medication. Your endogenous steroids are decreasing, and your body is telling you to relax, slow down, go back into your cave, go back into your hut, be with your family, your community. And so the body is giving different messages at different times of day. This is true for almost all people, almost everywhere, almost all the time. So setting up a meditation practice that imitates the natural cycles of the body seems like a wise, skillful, intelligent thing to do. You're using your meditation just as your hormone cycles in your body are creating a 24-hour cycle with a morning and evening of prepared mental states. So that's why that's a good reason. It's not an absolute law, but it's a good reason to meditate twice a day. Now, why an hour? An hour is arbitrary. There's no historical background for 1 hour, as you just said, Kory, and I totally agree. But arbitrary is not a word I would use because almost all human activities have agreed upon, manufactured limits or boundaries. For example, if you play baseball, you could play baseball with 4 outs per inning, or 7 outs per inning, or 2 outs per inning. You could have a 7 inning game or a 9 inning game. You could play in a diamond, you could play in an oval. So if the Yankees show up at Fenway Park, the Red Sox stadium, and they suddenly find there's an oval and they're told they get 4 outs per inning, it's not arbitrary for them to say that's not baseball. We play with a diamond and we play for 3 outs per inning. So Vipassana has created a worldwide community of fellow meditators. And one of the absolute core to that is knowing how long you're going to meditate and I call it your secular, your daily, your non-course meditation. And it's convenient that that daily practice follows the sittings of strong determination during the course. So somewhat arbitrarily, but I would say more, by a standardized agreement about how the game is played, we all play for an hour. I once had a very clear insight into this. Susan and I lived a very profession-bound, home-bound, family-bound life for many decades while we meditated. And then after we got older, we retired and were free to travel and serve in different places. And I remember going to a foreign country where we knew absolutely nobody, could not speak their language. And we met a bunch of meditators and we all sat down to meditate and we all just sat there and knew it's going to last an hour. And I thought, this is what makes a team. We know how we're going to play. So the hour is a tradition-bound, intelligent use of the twice daily bodily mandate as to how to use meditation in daily life. But there's one added factor I'd like to add. By the time I came to Vipassana, I was already a psychiatrist. As most people know, Freud invented the psychotherapeutic hour. I was very struck that Freud thought the proper use of the mind would be optimized if people spoke for an hour, and that our tradition, Ubaken, Goenkaji, etc., felt meditating for an hour was the proper use of your mind. So there may be a little more than arbitrariness. There may be some fundamental attentional components, fundamental strength or energy components, But as it is, it's the way we define ourselves as a community. And so I think that's also important.
Yeah, sometimes I hear students ask, well, why not sit 3 times a day for 40 minutes? But I guess you just address that. But at centers, we often sit 3 times a day. And sometimes students ask me if they should be sitting 3 1-hour sessions a day. So when increasing the frequency of times we meditate during the day, within reason, further reduce the number of background worries and stress that we have, that we bear weight upon our shoulders, and enhance the time we spend in awareness and equanimity with the recognition of anicca.
Yeah, I think that might be true. Um, but you might be creating a paradox where the desire to sit more every day, well, 3 is working better than 2. Why don't I go up to 4 hours a day? Now that I've done that, why don't I go up to 5 hours a day? So we don't want to create a tradition in which it becomes impossible to be a worker, a parent, a professional, a member of society. And that 2 hours is hard. Everybody knows it's hard. So let's not make it harder. But if you're so lucky that you can sit 3 hours a day, sure.
And would you say that sitting the 2 hours a day is part of the technique itself, or it's just something there to support the technique?
I'd say um, it's a rule of the game created by our ancestors, Ubaki and Goenkaji and their ancestors, that makes Vipassana rigorous enough that we're really committing to a lifestyle of meditation. 2 hours a day, every day, is a huge commitment for most people. I did that for many decades, still do it, and it's not always easy to get that in. And so it's a vigorous, powerful commitment. At the same time, it is doable for many, many people. And if we said 3 hours or 4 hours, there'd hardly be any serious meditators left. So um, let's not overburden people and let's not understress the importance of Vipassana. And that middle path, our teachers told us 2 hours a day was a good use of that.
Good. Thanks for that clarification. It seems that many old students, after a number of years of practice, seem to hit a plateau. They might no longer feel enthusiastic or joyful about their practice, but continue doing so out of a habit or maybe even feeling a fear of judgment, depending on their context. What would you say to such a student who does understand the long-term value of maintaining a daily practice, but struggles with finding short-term value and is becoming decreasingly attracted to the practice? In other words, how can we prevent the practice from becoming stale or feeling stale and mechanical and ensure that it remains relevant and joyful in our lives?
Okay, well, before we started this series of interviews, Kory, I teased you that you had the ability to put me on the spot. I said Professor Goldberg's questions can be quite challenging, and so you've actually nailed it. So probably about 35 years ago, I wrote a snail mail to Goenkaji. In those days, there was something called an aerogram. It was a little flimsy piece of paper, so thin it almost ripped every time you touched it. It had glue on it, so you could fold it up like a letter, but the glue didn't work, so the letter would fall apart. And that was the standard way of communicating between India and the United States. And I asked Goenkaji the exact question you're asking me. I'm meditating twice a day. I think it's valuable. I think it's important. It's so boring. I'm not getting anything out of it. Why am I doing this? Yeah. I was quite a bit newer meditator, but I was not that new. I was established in the sense, keeping with it, really sticking with it, trying to keep with my Sheila, and still felt that blah. So there's two answers to dealing with the blah. And the first is, well, if we went to a hierarchy of truths in Dhamma, the first truth of Dhamma is everything changes. And the second truth of Dhamma is we're filled with craving. And it's the craving that misleads us and makes us unable to appreciate our life, live our life realistically in confrontation with what's happening to us right now, as opposed to living a life based upon craving for whatever it is we don't have right now. And this is the primal example of that for the Vipassana meditator. My meditation feels like this. I don't want it to feel like this. I want it to feel like that. I read a book about mysticism. The people were all delirious with ecstasy. Every day they were so happy. How come that's not happening to me? How come I'm only getting feeling calm? How come I'm not getting feeling exhilarated? And so the first issue is meditation is learning to accept meditation without craving and the sensations you're getting without craving for different sensations you're getting. So that's the first part of living with the blahs. The second part of living with the blahs is that what's your quality of life when you're not meditating? Are you telling me that you're living a dynamic, energetic, committed Dhamma life, and yet your meditation feels like the blahs? I would say that when I faced that problem, it was because I had become too routinized. And the reason that my meditation felt routinized was that it was reflecting me. And your meditation does reflect your state of mind. And I had become too routinized. And so one of the key things I picked up from the people around me who were thriving in their Vipassana world was a dynamic, energetic, involved, commitment style relationship to the Vipassana tradition. If you're living in that way, I don't see how your personal meditation can be other than reflective of the enthusiasm and also the difficulties that you encounter living the Dhamma life. So accept what you're getting and also put yourself into a lifestyle that doesn't feel so bland. And those are the two ways to deal with that blandness.
Good. Thank you. Some students, they often feel that they're wasting their time and that they feel great. And they can't really see the benefit. I mean, you did address this, but sometimes it's a little bit different because sometimes students really feel that they don't actually see any of the value and that they're already happy and joyful and meditation is a waste of time. And similarly, I've had friends and family members who feel like coming to it, who have not done a 10-day course because they feel as if it would be a waste of time. They already feel happy with their life. They're content with their life. They don't see any of the dissatisfaction, the discontentment that some of us tend to feel, and which is what brought us to the course. So is there anything else? You kind of addressed it in the last question, but is there anything else you would add to say to the person who thinks that everything is peachy keen?
Well, I think the first thing to say is congratulations. It sounds fanciful to me that anybody actually records in their mind a summary of their life as being so benighted, easy, facile. There are stages of life that feel that way, and there are excitements that carry us along for years at a time in which we wake up feeling that excited, enthusiastic beneficence in our condition. But for example, in the world around us today, I don't have a day when I'm not aware of the difficulties in the world around us. And in every conversation I have with people of many nationalities and people who are near me here in the United States and people in other countries, everyone is aware of a great trial going on in the human condition right now. So for someone to claim that they have no distress, no dissatisfaction, no dukkha seems to stretch my sense of credibility. But if they have it, congratulations. We're not here to convince people they should meditate. We're here to explain to people what meditation is.
Mm-hmm. Would you say that feeling a sense of dukkha, dissatisfaction, discontentment is almost a prerequisite for practice.
Yes, I think that's the teaching of the Buddha. If we're going down like a hierarchy of important things to keep you on the path, one is uh, everything changes, and the other is this dissatisfaction that we always attach to conditions. It keeps attaching to new conditions. It's in us. It's a teaching or an attribute that we've picked up unconsciously, involuntarily, to be dissatisfied, to be craving, to be wishing for something different. And altering that is one of the main agendas with which we gain the benefits of Vipassana.
And that's so in the essay, Still Meditating in Troubled Times, which is in the book The Power of Small Changes, you highlight the importance of friendship on the path. How can we as meditators reconcile this emphasis on individual experiential practice, embodied practice that happens in the framework of this body with the vital role of community and friendship, especially during times that are challenging or when we feel isolated? How can we reconcile these two?
Great question, because it's frequently misinterpreted in the modern world. So the Buddha gave two pieces of advice, and they're not sewn together like in one sutta or one location in the texts. And therefore, it's easy to forget one when you're focusing on the other. The first piece of advice is there's a triple gem, and one of the components of the triple gem is Sangha. We don't meditate alone. This is not a tradition of hermits. People may go off on their own for a period of time, but our tradition is you can't be on the path unless you're part of a Sangha. However, Sangha is variously defined, and maybe it means only the attained people in the world of Dhamma, or maybe it means our common friends who are walking the path alongside of us. But one thing it definitely means for sure, Vipassana is a community-based activity. It's based on the concept of a membership in a Sangha, a community, a group. So that's one of the triple gem. That's the founding basic principle that the Buddha dispensed. So if we're not in some way engaged with other people who are on the path, we're not following the teaching of the Buddha. That's one side of his teaching. But there's another side of his teaching, which unfortunately is placed somewhat separately. And if you read one text, you can forget about the other. So the second part of the teaching is the Buddha said, when you feel that your social world is not contributory to you, you still meditate, you still practice alone. And he gave this rather uncomfortable metaphor. You wander alone in the jungle like an old rhinoceros. I have very little experience with old rhinoceroses. I've had many pets. I've never had an old rhinoceros. I don't know exactly what they wander like, but the idea is clear. You're aged, you're alone, your skin is thick and crinkled, you got a big horn in your face, and you still have to meditate if you're on the path. Otherwise, you'll fall off the path. This image of the determination of the solitary individual to pursue what is essential and important to them, regardless of the presence or absence of support, regardless of the presence or absence of good conditions around you, that's also part of the path. So our path contains these two balancing opposites. On the one side of the balance, community. On the other side of the balance, solitary. Both are in our path. Both will be called up in your life as you pursue the Dhamma life.
So just in thinking about the solitary aspects of the path, can you clarify the difference between loneliness and aloneness?
Well, aloneness would refer to being solitary in fact, physically solitary, but not feeling lonely. Loneliness would refer to a psychological state where you feel no one's on your team, no one's on your side, you're stuck in yourself and have no empathic connections supporting you. In theory, they should be very different. You should be able to be alone without feeling lonely. And in reality, it's a little more difficult to keep those two separate. When a person feels alone, there's a tendency, a social tendency in human beings to feel lonely. Of course, if it's something like the middle of a long course, you may be alone and delight in it. You're relieved from the responsibilities, problems, pressures of social life, and then you're alone and not lonely. But let's remember that in the middle of a course, you're surrounded by whatever the number of people on the course, 100 co-meditators, the teacher who talks to you and asks you questions, Goenkaji's discourses. So you're not really alone. So loneliness is not a particular virtue, but it is something that we all come upon. Aloneness is a part of the practice like the rhinoceros, and it's something we will definitely encounter and need to incorporate into our Dhamma life.
Would you suggest for meditators who are progressing a little further down the path to practice aloneness at times, not just at a center, but even outside of a center, a little bit of maybe some isolation, practicing alone without the support of all these fellow meditators and the discourses and the teacher?
Well, it's not a spoken aspect of our tradition, and I wouldn't want to say to anybody to add something into our tradition. But I would say in my life, that's come up quite a bit. For example, there have been times during my career when I was busy, and certain years it was very difficult to find the time to take a 10-day course, and it was easier for me to slide in a 10-day self-course at a particular interval where I was able to have the time to sit, and it didn't follow the calendar of a center. And those self-courses I found very uniquely valuable in exactly the way you're pointing towards, Kory. There in a self-course, you're really quite alone. And it ratchets up your need to find within yourself the clear motive of why you're doing this thing called Vipassana. When you're taking a course, there's this humorous, friendly, but highly convincing voice telling you why you should meditate. It's called Goenkaji. But when you're on a self-course, of course, the voice can be there on a tape recorder, but some added loneliness ratchets up your personal awareness of your deeper motives for why you're sitting. So it has some particular value. But I wouldn't say that people who are not attracted to that need to add it in. No.
Great, thank you. Yeah. In your essay, Don't Use Dhamma to Harm Yourself, Only Use Dhamma to Help Yourself, you explain how guilt and shame are subtle ways in which negativity prevents us from feeling successful. While guilt is never helpful, the Buddha did consider moral shame or remorse, or in the Pali language, hiri, as an important virtue needed to cultivate ethical awareness and self-restraint. Can you elaborate how and when shame might be harmful and when it might be helpful?
Well, we start with the problem that we've got some Pali terms and then we've got some English translation of those Pali terms. And is the English language word the actual equivalent of the Pali language word? So what is the exactly correct translation of the Buddha's term, moral shame? So I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if anybody can say authoritatively what the exact equivalent to any Pali term and any English term is. I would be cautious about attributing a word like shame as a virtuous part of the practice. I'd be cautious about it because our practice, we're going through, there are some core principles like everything changes, we've experienced dukkha, and another core issue in our our following of the path of the Buddha is the idea that um, we're walking towards a pure state where there's no negativity, and that's called nibbana. Maybe it's infinitely far for many of us. Maybe it's a little closer for some people. But the goal, the ideal, the heart and soul of the practice is overcoming negativities and becoming increasingly positive. So I don't see how shame can possibly be an attribute that leads forward on this path. So I'm going to challenge the validity of the translation or the validity of the connotation rather than the denotation of the term shame. I would say I don't see how self-criticism that's judgmental and negative can help a person make progress. And instead, I would wonder whether a proper term for that would be something like um, notice something's lacking. So, for example, if I don't meditate, uh, unfortunately, I do meditate, but if I didn't meditate or miss something and realize, well, I feel just disappointed. I didn't get my meditation in. I didn't get the benefit. I didn't get the uplift. I didn't get the virtue in it. That disappointment or that sense of dissatisfaction might be a positive stimulus. I can't see how shame would be helpful.
Mhm. But I think there's an ethical component to it. So, for instance, um, I don't break my sheet. Like I won't steal something, partly because I know it's wrong to steal. Stealing something means generating a lot of greed in my mind. I already had to have a lot of greed in my mind. I perpetuate more greed in my mind if I steal, and there's a following sense of guilt. But here, I think it also, there's a sense of being embarrassed. Like if I get caught, everybody in my community will know that I stole something, and this will make me look really bad, and it will further prevent me from meditating successfully. I think there's a little bit of that in there. Would you agree?
Well, I mean, I think that that may be in the in the echo inside the long old tradition. But there's a difference today, psychologically speaking. We look at a difference between those things we do because of social pressure, positive or negative, to do them. For example, I won't steal because I'll get punished. People won't like me. I won't be held in proper esteem if I steal. But that's a pretty superficial motivation. That's like saying, I actually do want to steal, and I would if I could get away with it, but I don't think I can get away with it. That's very different than what we call an internalized morality. An internalized morality is this is the way I'm going to live. I've determined it's the right path for me. It works for me. It makes me feel I'm a good person. It makes me feel my life is valuable and worthwhile. It puts me in the company of other people who uphold this kind of quality of life, and that's the way I'm going to live. It has nothing to do with whether people see me that way or don't see me that way. And so that's called internalized moral values, and their shame does not enter in.
Even more complicated is the term otapa. So the Buddha often paired these two terms together, hiri and otapa, which is often translated as fear or moral dread. Can you discuss how otapa might be advantageous or detrimental to our Vipassana practice?
I think this is again, what is the exact translation of the word? But if we let's just say it means moral dread, then to me the difference between this and shame is I think we can expect of people or people around us mostly ourselves, we can expect of ourselves to pretty much outgrow shame. Adults tend to be relatively beyond shame. Shame is something you feel heavily as you're developing as a human being, let's say in childhood, adolescence, even young adulthood. But moral dread is slightly different. And the dread of the meaning of your whole life, the dread of falling short of your bigger agendas and goals, the dread of not finding the safety in Dhamma from the difficulties of human existence that's filled with craving, aversion, life, and death. That's harder to say we should outgrow it. It's easier to see how it's really present in us. And so it's a more deeply rooted, continuously challenging component of our minds that we will continue to come upon in our meditation. So hopefully we'll transcend it, but maybe we'll have to work with it for quite a while.
So, also in the essay, Don't Use Dhamma to Harm Yourself, you discuss how disrupting fixed mental patterns sometimes aids us, even unintentionally, to solve personal issues or personal problems during a course. I know this has certainly been my experience. And I sometimes even see old students going into courses hoping to resolve a particular problem. That's one of the intentions of going into the course, is to solve this problem that's happening in their lives. So is this problem solving feature a goal or a byproduct of the practice? Is there any danger of generating an expectation that we will emerge from our course with a particular solution to a very specific problem?
Yes, there is a danger. So if you enter a course with the attitude, like, I've got this problem, I've got a financial problem, I've got a problem with my work, I've got a problem with my marriage, and I've got a problem with my health, and I want this problem solved in 10 days, and you're looking at your watch, I would say that you've lost Vipassana. You're off the path. In fact, you're misusing Vipassana. So in Vipassana, our goal becomes awareness, awareness of sensations, being equanimous with them, walking the path with all its virtues and avoiding all the problems that we create for ourselves. And that's the goal of the course. So definitely the word byproduct would be the proper term to refer to this problem solving, which should occur only without intention. If you practice Vipassana, if you are constantly attuned to returning your attention to awareness of sensation and keeping equanimity with that awareness, then previous patterns of thought are being disrupted. Instead of thinking, now what should I say to the doctor next? Which kind of doctor should I go to? How can I cure this health problem? Which medication should I take? You're not following those trains of thoughts. You're following trains of thoughts that say, what am I feeling in my body? Where am I now? If I'm moving part by part through my body, what am I feeling? If I'm sweeping my body, what am I feeling? And can I maintain equanimity with this? Then the planning, strategizing, problem solving component keeps getting disrupted. If that disruption of fixed, repetitive, unproductive patterns of thought leads to a new solution, as it often does, fantastic. But if that doesn't happen to you, that was not the goal of your course, was not the goal of your 1 hour practice, it's not the goal of Vipassana, and you just have to accept that problem is not going to be solved by Vipassana. I need to consult my doctor, ask my friends who have similar health problems what to do about it, etc. So yes, going into a course with the determination to solve a problem is misusing the course.
Good, thanks for that clarification. So in the same essay, you state, open quote, during meditation, many of our routine human frailties arise, like anger, frustration, envy, pettiness. If you can observe these emotions at the level of sensations that accompany them, and avoid the reaction of condemning yourself, and self-acceptance emerges as a treasured resetting of your mind. Close quote. So my question is it always possible to know which emotions are associated with which sensations? We have millions of sensations arising and passing each moment, so connecting the two seems rather difficult, if not impossible.
Correct. I agree with you. So there's a number of places where in the Pali Canon, the Buddha says the things we're feeling right now are a product of streams or heaps of many, many, many actions which have left their reactions in our psyche, in our body, in our minds. So, for example, in any one day, it would be an interesting study for a meditator to have a little clicking thing on their iPhone. Every time you change your thought, every time you think a different thought, click it. How many times a day? How many thoughts, volitions, wishes, fears, hopes, desires, angers, daydreams do you have every day? And then how many in a week? And then how many in a lifetime? Millions. So we are a composite of millions of volitions piled on top of each other. And many things can surface at the exact same time. The classic example is a person driving on the interstate, driving 65 miles an hour. You better be pretty alert. You are pretty alert. You're driving very skillfully and very well, and you're an alert, concerned driver. But at the same time, you're thinking, next Tuesday, should I go swimming at 2:30 in the afternoon before my friend arrives at the lake, or should I wait till 3 when he gets there and I'll go with him? You can think while you're thinking something else. We can think a couple of things at once. Sometimes it multiplies. A lot of people get this when they meditate. They recognize, oh my God, I'm thinking 3 or 4 things at the same time. And that's also true for emotions. We can be upset at the same time that we're enjoying something. You're in theater, you're watching a very profound, great recreation of Shakespeare's Hamlet. You're very involved with this magnificent play. And at the same time, you're thinking, I wonder whether I should put aside money to pay my taxes this year or not. So associating any one movement of body sensations at any one moment in time with any one mental state is usually not a fully accurate thing to do. And our goal is to just observe, to not explain, to not reduce our sensations, to explain them by our thoughts and feelings, just to observe them and then remain equanimous with them. So yes, it could be a false attribution.
Good, thanks. Again, in the same essay, Don't Use Dhamma to Harm Yourself, Only Use Dhamma to Help Yourself, you discuss the common experience of daydreaming during meditation. This kind of follows from the last response you gave. You state, open quote, don't condemn your daydreaming because it serves its own purpose in its proper time and place, close quote. So my question is, how can meditators discern the difference between unhelpful rumination that might exacerbate anxiety, let's say about taxes or work or school or relationship, whatever the case may be, and the just natural, healthy functioning of our minds that might be occurring during daydreaming while we're on the cushion?
So the remarkable blessing and curse of being a human being is the ability to imagine, strategize, plan, prepare, create alternative imaginations, plannings, and preparations, create alternatives to the other alternatives. That thinking awareness, that strategizing, scheming, perception into the future that makes us human is a absolutely essential gift. It's the thing that makes us the unique phenomenon on this planet, the phenomenon of relatively conscious, relatively problem-solving animals. It also means we're busy, we're preoccupied in our minds, and we're craving and averting from many things all the day, every day. We're planning. How can we get this? How can we avoid that? How can we get what we want? How can we avoid what we don't want? So there's a difference between the skill set by which we live, survive, and thrive in activities that require such planning and skill. There's a difference between that and Vipassana, which is creating an entirely different mental component to add into our brains and bodies. And that mental component is the ability to accept, appreciate, not crave, not feel aversion, not feel disappointment, not feel anger, not feel hate, not to wish, not to regret, just to be with the reality of sensations and accept it. So while we're meditating, the directions are awfully clear. All daydreaming should be rerouted to awareness of sensations with equanimity. But most of the time, we forget to do that. And when we forget and then suddenly wake up to the awareness that we're meditating and shouldn't be in that ruminative set without any self-blame, without feeling it's wrong to daydream, just feeling that's not what I intend to do now, and go back to your meditation. I would say, going back to our previous conversations, I would say no shame, no regret, just back to the practice.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying, okay, so daydreaming is fine, but as we learned, especially during the Anapana section of the course, not daydreaming during the actual meditation session is even better. Are there other strategies? So one strategy you've just outlined of just trying to remember to come back to our breath or our sensations, which is key. Are there other strategies that you can suggest to help meditators go beyond distraction and excessive daydreaming?
I think this is the number one question. Is that right? So when you're on the Dhamma seat and students come up to you with a question, this is the number one question. People all feel I'm daydreaming too much. I'm not meditating enough. My attention's no good. I think the person on the cushion next to me has better attention. I think my wife has better attention. I think Kory has better attention. I think Paul has better attention. All people daydream for the reasons I said. That is, it's a key survival feature. It's the close to the essence of what makes us human, is the vitality and creativity of depicting future scenarios, past scenarios, imagining our way into life before we live it, and manipulating the imagination so that we can live life better than we would have if we hadn't thought about it ahead of time. We cannot get rid of that. We should not want to get rid of that. It's also not meditation, and it's the very essence of why we meditate, is to be able to move out of that one attribute, valuable as it is, and to move into a different attribute of the human condition, which is appreciation, acceptance, allowing the space that we've created for our hearts and minds while we meditate to fill up with things like metta and the paramis.
So it's really this radical acceptance that's all we can do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I recently returned from sitting a course at Dhammatapovan 2, the splendid long course center adjacent to Dhammagiri. And as anybody who's meditated in India knows or has experienced, there's just a regular stream of sounds, whether they're from trains or trucks or honking cars, people chatting, construction workers, maybe the noisy meditator next to us, all sorts of intrusions. For me, there were two songs that often came to my mind. One was from the popular children's song Frozen, Let It Go, or it was the Beatles song, Let It Be. And these two songs, or just, the chorus, Let It Go, Let It Be, served as a constant reminder to not get stuck in these sounds that I have absolutely no control over. And also to not get trapped by unreal, self-perpetuating thoughts and stories that are swimming around my head. So anytime I noticed that I was lost in a daydream or a fantasy or a nightmare, one of these two songs would come to my mind, and I would tell myself or sing to myself, let it be. Um, and I would return to my breath or sensations. So, can you speak to the difference between noticing the occurrence of thoughts, the fact that they're happening, versus actually getting involved with the thoughts themselves?
Yeah, I don't think I can observe thoughts. I'm not sure I have that ability. I don't know if other people do. If I'm thinking, then I'm in it. It is thinking. I am it. The thinking is happening, and I'm not really observing it. Even if I say I'm observing it, that's self-deception because I'm moving along in it. Thinking is the stream of self that is delusional and that has control over me in that moment. And so the only way I can know that I'm observing thinking is to try to exit from that thought and rediscover my body sensations. And that's when I can be stationed on a different platform and know that the thoughts are passing phenomena in my mind and that they're not me. So the only way I know is through Vipassana, and the only way I know is through the simple-minded repetition of the idea of getting back to those sensations. Otherwise, just observing thought is, I think, not really possible, at least for me.
Mhm. So can we not be mindful of the thought process itself without getting caught up in the content? So a thought arises and you notice the thought arises and then you come back to your breath or sensation. But there's still a recognition that the mind is thinking and then we stop thinking. We
Okay,
stop getting involved in the content.
yeah, I guess so. Uh, but if it goes on for more than a second or two, that content, speaking for me, that content will sweep me down its pathway and my awareness will be drowning and the content will be gaining ascendancy. And that
Sure.
happens all the time, of course.
And in that moment of emerging and recognizing that that's happening, can that lead to can we develop insight into anicca at that moment as well? Or it's only when we're working with the sensation itself?
Well, I think one of the um, defining attributes of our tradition, which I find um, anchoring for me, is the idea that when we're thinking about anicca, after all, anicca is everywhere all the time, and I'm looking at the weather pattern. Is the rain going to lighten up today? Or looking at the news, hey, is this horrible situation going to transform itself? We can say we're with anicca, and we are aware that life changes, and maybe that's what anicca means. But it's different than a psychosomatic embeddedness in anicca, which is what our tradition steers us towards, in which it's our body that's getting the wisdom of anicca, not just our thought process of saying this is anicca. So I think there are different levels or values or intensities to the anicca experience, and the deeper levels occur when the body is entrained in the anicca awareness.
Great, perfect. Thank you, Paul. So now we will turn our attention to questions from the audience. This person writes, I'm a new but serious meditator, practicing twice a day for over 2 years. I lost my mother early this year. My practice has been helping me a lot in going through the grieving process. But sometimes I still feel strong sadness during my daily practice. I'm not sure how to properly face the sadness. Can you please guide me when the sadness appears during my meditation, how to cope with it, and what the attitude should be? Thank you.
When we're meditating, our goal is so singular, so pure, so unimpeachable. And that goal is we're trying to be in our body, feel its sensations, hopefully in all parts of the body, and to be equanimous with those sensations. That's the only thing we're practicing when we're meditating. So when sadness comes on your mind while you're meditating, then the goal is just feel what the sensations are that are accompanying that feeling. And as we discussed a few moments ago, your sensations are complex and reflect not only what you're thinking now, but all that's been stored in you over millions of volitions, millions of thoughts, millions of actions. So your sensations are a complex repository of thought and feeling, and you're feeling sadness. And all of that you're trying to refocus on with awareness of sensations and understanding their essential characteristic is anicca. But the sadness may be something that actually is very healthy. And I think one problem I might be hearing in this question that you've asked is the idea that there's something wrong that you're feeling sadness, or you're implying, how can I get rid of this sadness? Or you're implying, it's so burdensome, I just wish it weren't there. And so ironically, there's a bit of craving accompanying your sadness. No one craves sadness, but you're craving to come out of sadness. You're craving to get rid of it, to have it taken away. And you're expecting Vipassana to take this thing away. That's a kind of craving, or you could say it's an aversion to sadness. And I would say, well, this sadness sounds kind of healthy and noble to me. You're very deeply appreciative of what gifts this person gave you and how you were held up and guided through life by this person, and you miss them. That's quite a important recognition of the role of helpers in your life. Generally, the rule is when we feel that we've lost a helper, the best way we can come out of the grief associated to that loss of this guiding parental figure is to ourselves begin to take upon ourselves in life roles that are generous and giving towards other people. We lose the aversion to the sadness of loss when we understand that it's guiding us to be altruistic adults now and in our future. So in your meditation, don't crave or have aversion for getting rid of the loss. In your life, when you're not meditating, seek out possibilities for you to be as helpful as this person was to you.
Thank you, Paul. So another question that's along similar lines. This person writes, I have a huge fear of losing my near and dear ones, and it hinders me to even sit to practice. I know that my mind is making excuses, but even when I'm doing work or anything else, these thoughts scare me. What should I do?
Well, the fear of loss is a normal feeling that everybody has. And it's what makes us social beings and keeps us as social beings. But an overwhelming fear of loss is something different. We might wonder whether it's something called separation anxiety, constant fear of being alone, being separated from the people around you, losing them. And if If you can meditate with it, that's helpful. And when we're meditating, our goal is not to get rid of the feeling, just to be able to be aware of it and understand its anicca. If you feel haunted all the time, haunted while you're meditating, haunted when you're not meditating by a fear of loss, that's a little over dominating. It's taking too much of your life, too much of your energy. And I would suggest you find other ways for dealing with this separation anxiety by seeking out people who are experts on dealing with separation anxiety. While you're doing that, you can meditate. After you've done that, you can meditate. But this one very important feature of life should not be so overwhelmingly important that it's blocking everything your daily thoughts and your meditation. It needs to be solved by experts who can help you.
So the next question this person asks, is it helpful to try and make sense of our ruminations while we meditate?
Um, while you meditate, no. We don't want to generate thoughts about thoughts. It'll become an endless cycle. Why am I thinking about grief over the loss of my mother? Why am I thinking about what I'm thinking about? Why am I thinking about what I'm thinking about, what I'm thinking about? So it's a, it's definitely the opposite direction of meditation. However, our meditation is very intriguing, isn't it? If meditation is nothing else, it's interesting. It's amazing. So much comes up on our mind that we had no intention of placing there. Our minds are sources of creativity, um, cascades of new images, insights, ideas, many very helpful, many incredibly primitive and leading us down the path of attachments. So, in between meditation, meditation stirs up in us a lot of very interesting questions about who we are and the quality of our life. And thinking about that when you're not meditating, to me, is a very wonderful part of meditation. And I hope you do that too.
So the next question that I have here for you, it's often difficult to watch my respiration and sensations when I'm overwhelmed by feelings of anger or distress in life situations. How can I improve this?
Good. Well, when we're meditating, again, so this point is coming up repeatedly. When we're meditating our twice a day meditation, we're doing something different than the rest of the day. And the guidance or the practice is slightly different when you're meditating than when you're living your life. When you're meditating and you're overwhelmed by very strong sensations repeatedly, and the strong sensations have an origin that you understand, say you get angry a lot, and you have strong sensations, and it makes it very hard for you to meditate. Our practice suggests a few things. One thing is you don't have to be sitting perfectly still. That again is for the 10-day course. And when you're at home, you can move, and sometimes just a slight movement will take away a certain amount of pain and stiffness in your body, and usually a certain amount of anger can be alleviated in that way. It's a simple-minded technique, but can be helpful. Similarly, when I have very strong sensations that feel like they can disrupt my hour or knock me off the cushion, so to speak, I find Goenkaji's old advice is over decade after decade, it's worked so well for me. Moving your attention to what Goenkaji called extremities means the soles of your feet and the palms of your hand. And the biggest moments of distraction and difficulty staying with meditation, having strong sensations, strong thoughts and feelings, I find meditating on the palms of my hands is very helpful. And I find a little less helpful, but similarly, meditating on the soles of my feet. However, when we're not meditating and we're noticing that our life is filled with anger, Another question comes up, which is the non-meditative but Dhamma volition to live a life with less anger or no anger. And so a question should come on your mind, why there's so much anger in your life. Are you thrust into circumstances that are pretty enraging? Is it something to do with the difficulties you have to confront in life? I'm thinking of someone who may have a very oppressive job circumstance, or someone who may find themselves in negotiations with two embattled sides, and it's frustrating to be in such a position. Or is there something in you that gets angry too easily? You find anger rising up as a way to not notice other features of the conversation, the situation, the working plight that you're in, that you might manage in a manner very different from anger. For example, asking the person to change the way they're talking to you, asking yourself to make a brief exit from a difficult circumstance and only return into it when you feel less angry. That is to say, anger management behaviors. So if you're meditating and you can observe your sensations through one technique or another, like observing the extremities, and that helps you lead a life of less anger, do that. But if you need more skill in dealing with anger, don't let the fact that you're a meditator prevent you from learning the skills of anger management as a separate, skillful, virtuous parami.
Great. Thank you, Paul. So then another person asks a question about the neurobiological changes that occur across an hour of Vipassana. Do you want to address that, or should we just say that person can listen to the second interview that we did last time? So there are a few other questions.
Well, to answer that shortly, I don't think there's a fixed neurobiological pattern. For example, every time I meditate, it's so different. That's one of the things, how do you keep meditating for 50 years? And the answer is, well, it's different all the time. It's like a new world every time I sit down, close my eyes. It starts out, it's kind of the same thing over and over. And within a few seconds, minutes, I'm in a different place than I've ever been before. Meditation is altered every time you do it, and you won't find one fixed pattern enfolding meditation. However, over a lifetime, meditation does certainly alter your neurobiology. And as Kory said, we've discussed that. We've got it on a really nice set of conversations that we did previously, and they should be on the Pariyatti site. That is our conversations about the neurobiology of meditation. So you can refer to those in much greater detail.
Great. So this person asks, how can I foster a Dhamma lifestyle in my small home to plant a small seed for my adult children living with me to find Dhamma themselves? And there's a similar question, slightly different, but similar. Maybe I can ask both of them that you can address at the same time. So this person asks, how do you decide between accepting and observing loved ones, such as a partner or children, making mistakes, or showing them that they are on the wrong path? Do you let them continue until they realize, or do you have a responsibility to correct them when you see they're doing something wrong? When do I intervene? I think
Yeah,
both questions are similar as they're both addressing how to um, get loved ones to to practice and yeah.
well, when I remember so vividly in my first course and in subsequent courses, wondering if Vipassana was crazy or not, why I was doing it. Is it sane? It's from India. Can a Western person do this? Does it make sense? Is it scientific? Is it rational? And one of the features of Goenkaji's teaching that really helped me feel, yeah, Vipassana is safe, sane, and good for me, is Goenkaji's repeated position. We're not here to convert anybody. We're not here to convince anybody. Um, the job that Goenkaji gave me was to speak and inform people about Vipassana. But it's important to say inform people about. That's very different than getting people to sit. I've never tried to get anybody to sit. I hope I never will. And I would say to the parent of children, you don't want to try to get people to meditate. It's not our tradition, and it's something that's going to backfire and only make them more negative and harm you. Going back to the picture of living with people, not necessarily trying to get them to meditate, but how to deal with them. There's no one rule or guidance that we have that solves all our interpersonal problems, including the very, very common, deeply painful problem of watching younger people make mistakes that we feel we know the answer to, and they won't accept our answers. This is the problem when you have a 1 year old, and this is the problem when you have a college age child, and this is the problem when you have an adult child. And as I said, while there's no one size that fits all, the general approach has to be getting rid of your own self-righteous indignation that you're a better person and you've got to tell these dummies how to be as cool as you are. Implicit in much of our distress when we watch other people is our self-righteousness and our feeling that we're superior. And that's a pretty good guarantee that our conversation will be more self-serving than helpful to someone else. So if you can monitor your own real volition, the real volition, how much of your volition is to help that other person? How much of your volition is to show that other person what you know? You want to be there to help. You don't want to be there to establish superiority and dominance. When you can enter another person's world without those impositions of your ego, you're going to end up in the long term being more helpful. So I would say the Dhamma way is self-observation, self-monitoring, self-awareness, and using that to ask when and how you can most effectively converse with the person you care about.
Good. And here's a question that sort of follows that. This person asks, if I have a trace of anger and I'm not able to practice metta, I often have traces of anger towards the administration. I don't know which administration, but any administration. We can even say family or children or parents, friends, colleagues. So if I have traces of anger towards these people and I haven't been able to practice metta as I would like, how can I overcome this and practice metta?
Yeah, very good question. I think there's a slight misunderstanding there. Um, if you have traces of anger, you're just a human being. You shouldn't condemn yourself, and you shouldn't block yourself from the pleasure and the wisdom of practicing metta as a flawed, non-saintly human being who still has traces of anger, but who also has more than traces of metta. Go right ahead and practice metta, even in the presence of this flaw, because that flaw may not go away for a long time, if ever. So it's a misunderstanding that you can only practice metta if you're entirely in a state of purity of mind. But if the anger is strong enough that you really don't feel metta at all, and yet you're a Dhamma person who understands what metta is, understands the importance of it, really wants to practice it, Goenkaji tells us, really, he gives us two different layers of metta, two different degrees of metta. One is a purely spontaneous upwelling of the feelings of metta as they arise in you out of genuine, authentic, heartfelt metta. That's a great, great gift. In many moments, we will feel that after our practice, or we'll feel it in complete disconnection from sitting. We'll just feel it sometimes. But there's another layer of metta. It's a more superficial layer. It's for earlier practitioners. Maybe we're all early practitioners on a certain day at a certain time. Speaking for myself, I frequently feel genuinely spontaneous metta, and sometimes there's a sitting, and at the end of it, there's something on my mind that's just not really in keeping with metta, and it's kind of blocking or making my metta feel artificial or superficial. Goenkaji's advice is go ahead anyway. Think metta. Thinking metta is not the same as feeling metta. Thinking metta is more artificial, it's more forced, it's more superficial. It's not sweeping up our body sensations, it's just thoughts. But it's the beginning of metta. The beginning of metta is the volition to have it and to spread it in the world. And thinking is one way to do that when you're not fully with it. So I would say go right ahead and practice it with feelings if you can. And if you can't, just think about metta and spread your volition to have metta and to put it out into the world.
So this person talks about feeling guilty when missing a daily practice. They're aware that there should be no negativity in Dhamma, but they can't help but feel guilty whenever they miss a daily sitting.
Well, I think if you were here during the first hour, you heard Kory and I have a lot of back and forth about issues of guilt and shame and when are these contributory, when are these keeping with the Buddha's teaching, when are these not in keeping with the Buddha's teaching. To me, I would say when I listen to students, and I've listened to many, many students over many decades, guilt is one of the most non-contributory feelings that people have. It's just not helpful. It makes you feel smaller and worse, and it doesn't whip you into shape or get you to correct your misconduct like missing the sitting. It just adds to your feeling that you don't want to sit. First, you don't want to sit. Next, when you don't want to sit, you feel with guilt. Oh my God, this practice is just driving you away from the practice. I would say if you miss that sitting, to me, there's a couple of ways you can cope with that. One is just say, today's a new day, or this evening is a new day from the morning, and I'm just going to go walk forward. I'm not going to look back. If you have this capacity, I would suggest use this capacity, which is to ask, why did you skip that sitting? Maybe you can find certain things that are recurrent in your mind or in your lifestyle or in the way you time your sittings or in how hungry you are or how tired you are. Many times people can find fixed patterns of preventing you to sit sitting when you're too tired, sitting when you're too angry, living a life that is not quite compatible with the way you should be living your life in order to get those great Dhamma volitions stronger and more effective, such that there is a volition to sit. So you sit out of real interest in it rather than guilt that you didn't sit. So if possible, look for the cause. And if that's not possible, just surrender that guilt. It's not going to help you at all. And start again. That's our great teaching. Start again.
Mm. I find it connected to that. I find a lot of people in our society have these strong feelings of guilt and even self-loathing, self-hatred. Have you noticed an increase in these kinds of feelings, or is this just something
Yes.
almost inherent in our Western culture?
Yeah. I think it's inherent in humans who live in groups. Groups make us feel guilty for not being who the group wants us to be, whether that group is a religious group, a work-based group. even a softball team. You feel guilty when that grounder goes through your legs and gets into the outfield. So guilt is heavily utilized by human communities to dominate over and control individuals. And that makes living not from your heart, not from your volitions, but living out of fear and obedience. So I think exiting from guilt is one of the gifts of Dhamma. I think guilt is on the rise because when we live in a world in which we can accomplish and do things well, we don't feel guilt. The surgeon who can do good surgery does not feel guilt. The teacher who can communicate how to read to people in their first year of school, 6-year-olds, 5-year-olds, that teacher does not feel guilt. So I believe our society now has set up more tasks that are unfulfilling, constantly busy, less sense of accomplishment. So I think guilt is on the rise. It's too bad, and I hope all meditators can find a way to live a life in which they know very well they're making a contribution, a Dhamma contribution to the world through their volitions and actions, and can therefore disentangle themselves from the group pressure of guilt.
Thank you. That's beautiful. So this student here, or this listener, says that claims that they've gotten rid of aversion and craving, and the result is a feeling of emptiness. And the person asks, how can I find meaning in things without having a response towards it? And I'm guessing because there's this feeling of emptiness.
Great. I'm glad you asked that because whoever asked that, thank you. And I also had a question like that. And many, many students feel that way. It's like, well, if you get rid of craving and aversion, what's the point of living? You live for your cravings. So you don't have that, life becomes completely flat and meaningless. And I had that worry about when I encountered Buddhism. I felt, man, this will make you as dull as can be. And then I encountered Goenkaji. Holy moly, he's like a living explosion of energy and commitment and enthusiasm for life. So it's got to be true. If he emblemized the mature practitioner of Vipassana, it's got to be true that flatness, not caring, being uninvolved, is not the end product of living a life with Vipassana. So I had to examine Vipassana in myself more carefully. And what comes up when, in those moments, those rare moments, I would say, if a person finds themselves free of craving and aversion all the time, that's kind of unusual. For most people, it's quite rare. Most of the times, we're being consumed by craving and aversion. But it's true. We come upon moments when we're relatively free of it. And what comes up in that moment is the desire for meaningful giving to the human world. The thing that's most liberating about this path of Dhamma is its emphasis that our personal salvation is matured or given direction or becomes a path when we notice that our personal salvation is the same thing as doing those things that help others. So we only become fully on the path when we're fully behind social engagement. So the answer to this person's question is instead of craving and aversion, use service in the broadest sense. Service means helping Vipassana centers, but it also means everything you do every day to be contributory into the life stream of other people. That's the meaning of losing our personal craving and aversion.
Great. So here's another question coming back to you were just talking about uh, craving and aversion in daily life. So this person is asking something about daily life. They write, many times while working, on other things, I get overwhelmed by the body sensations, and part of my mind automatically starts observing them. This takes my 100% focus away from the job at hand. Any suggestions to deal with it in such situations?
It sounds pretty wonderful to me. It sounds to me like you, the questioner, are a meditator who's become very committed to meditation, and you're using meditation sort of it's in a pinch. It's true that Goenkaji says our goal should have 100% focus on what we're doing when we're not meditating. And I would say, I agree. I think that's really important. I strive for that, and I like to think that I achieve that often. But it's also true that I have moments just like the ones you're describing. There's something worrying me, disturbing me, distracting me. I'm not 100% on what I'm doing. If I could be, I would be, but I can't be. What a gift in that moment to be able to turn my mind to those sensations that are there and try to work with the problem that I have using Vipassana quite spontaneously for a few moments in that circumstance. So I'd say, I think you're doing a great thing. Hopefully, your life will continue on the Dhamma path and these kinds of distractions will lessen. But I predict they'll be there from time to time. And you've got this great tool and you seem to be using it well.
Thank you. So this person writes, surrendering to God and karma yoga, doing work without attachment to outcomes, is a deep-rooted practice in my tradition. Is this okay for me to keep my tradition while also practicing Vipassana? I don't find Vipassana and my beliefs in surrendering to God incompatible. They are both useful practices to properly navigate the complexities of life.
Yeah, we don't intend that when people come to the first or second or third or more Vipassana courses, that our job is to eradicate all their previous beliefs and feelings, to brainwash them into being uh, Dhamma repeaters, Dhamma followers, and to uh, try to expunge who they've been. I would feel very disappointed with our practice if it was just an intended to make everyone become our uh, dulled out, uh, obedient followers. So our goal is not that you should eradicate who you've been. But there are certain problems that come along with beliefs, and you can observe them yourself and make your decisions as you progress using Vipassana. One thing about the idea of surrendering to God, it has a beautiful feeling in it. It means you're taking your ego out of the equation, or you're trying to do so, and trying to do what you feel is right. God usually stands for something we feel that is holy, good, and correct. But it also means that you're taking away a little bit of your own volitional responsibility for your life. And our practice, inherited from the Buddha, is to emphasize the importance of our own volitions as the things that shape our karma or our karma. So this is a place you can observe. No need to get rid of your thoughts about God, but you want to see and wonder whether surrendering to God means a little bit of, I'm not responsible for my actions, so I think I can not really feel fully committed to being a responsible person because I feel God is responsible for me. That's a question for you to ask yourself. In terms of um, taking yourself, your ego, out of the equation, out of the way that you're living, if you feel that your religious practices are helping you do that, it sounds like a very compatible contribution to your continued life on the Dhamma path.
This student or listener writes, along the path, I notice that more and more I tend to prefer alone. I prefer to be alone more than before. The social circumstances become more of a burden. At the same time, I do feel lonely from time to time. How should I balance solitude and social connection as a meditator?
Great. Well, we discussed that earlier in this session when Kory was having a dialogue with me. So Buddha has given us two directions, and he kind of says you have to walk in two directions at the same time. Or you could say walk in two directions, one, then the other, then the other, then the one. And those two directions are we're social. The Buddha's teaching is not hermetic. The Buddha's teaching is be part of a sangha, a community, a tradition. Only making friends on the path is the whole path, the only path. It's a very socially oriented practice. Meditation is not to be misunderstood as a solitary, narcissistic, solipsistic self-absorption. We're there with people to receive help from other people and to give help to other people. At the same time, the Buddha said the opposite of that. He said, wander alone in the jungle like a rhinoceros, whatever that's like. It sure implies being tough, solitary, and being able to tough it out on your own. Both of those are part of our life. So you want to oscillate between those two and check out when is one more important and when is the other more important. It's so nice that Vipassana gives you the ability to tolerate more solitude. Fantastic. I feel the same way. I feel Vipassana has greatly helped me in that compartment. At the same time, that's not the whole path for sure. Friends upon the path is the whole path. Sangha is one of the triple gem. After a bit of solitude, you feel lonely. That sounds like the wisdom of your mind and body telling you you've had enough of this solitude. Why don't you now redirect your life towards these ideas of Sangha, community, tradition, service? Both are there. Follow both.
Great. So we'll end with one last question. So this student is asking about achieving benefits during a course versus daily life. So this person writes, the Buddha laid out certain milestones on the path to check whether we are on the right track of Vipassana. Goenkaji elaborates them more during the long course discourses. Do we need to be in long courses, i.e. an ideal course environment where we can meditate deeply to experience these benefits, or can one experience them even during daily sittings?
You can experience them during daily sittings and during daily life. The two most important yardsticks that Goenkaji gives us are Dhamma service, which if you have the time and capacity, it can mean service directly at a center, service directly as part of the Dhamma community, but it can also mean being busy as a nurse or a teacher or a doctor, or being busy as a mother or even as a grown-up child, being in a position to help other people. Dhamma service, taking care of the world, commitment to spreading what you've gained into the world of other people, where the benefits that you've achieved become helpful to other people. That's a milestone you can observe all day, every day. If you're like me, you'll also observe where you're falling short, and you'll be encouraged to ratchet up your Dhamma life to do better in this endlessly unfolding category of Dhamma service. The second milestone that Goenkaji gives us is metta. The two go together, don't they? Goenkaji says your progress on the path can be measured by how much metta you develop. So those two dovetail, and our path is so geared towards positive social commitments, positive emotions in ourselves. They're available all the time. There are specific meditative stages that can be observed only when a person is meditating, only when a person is meditating deeply. But there are these huge developments in our personality that we can observe almost all the time.
Wonderful. Thank you, Paul. So we'll wrap up there. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with everybody today. Um, it's probably a stunningly beautiful day outside, and
Yes.
you've chosen to be in front of the computer with all of us. So that's many thanks for that. And same thing with all the participants. We've had a nice turnout today. So really, thank you everyone for coming and being part of this event.
Thank you,
So
Kory.
Thank you so much, Paul and Kory, for joining us today. On behalf of Pariyatti, I'd like to thank you all for attending this event.
have a wonderful day, everyone. Bye bye.
Bye bye.